Hi, everybody, and welcome to our session, Making AI Stick, a practical path to maturity, ROI, and scalable insight impact. I'm Quirk's editor, Joe Ridholm, and before we get started today, let's quickly go over the ways you can participate in today's discussion. You can use a chat tab to interact with other attendees during the session, and you can use a Q&A tab to submit questions for the presenters during the session, and we'll get to as many as they have time for during the Q&A portion. Our session is presented by Rival. Andrew, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great to see everybody. Thank you very much for your time. I want to quickly introduce our panel, and then we've got some content to deliver and a great conversation we're looking forward to having. So very happy to have some really smart people with us today. So I'm just going to quickly read through these, and then we're going to have folks do their own introduction. So Jason Jacobson, who spoke with us many times from Sekisui House, who's the Senior Director of Consumer Insights. We have Adam Husein, who's the SVP of Data Analytics and Insights at Supercell. Patricia Chapin-Bayley, who is Senior Vice President at Reid Insights, which is one of the companies in the Rival Group portfolio. And I'm Andrew Reid, with a catfish picture from 10 years ago. I'm the founder and CEO of Rival Technologies. Great to have everybody with us. Let's just start with some introductions. Adam, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself?
Sure. Adam Husein here. I focus on really building data and AI systems across companies like Supercell and in my past Warner Brothers and Firebird Music. My focus has really been on turning research and analytics and AI into decision systems that people can trust and they can use on a regular basis. And if you're thinking about how to move great insight into real ROI, I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
So for people that don't know what Supercell is, do you want to maybe double click just real quick on them as a company?
Sure, I appreciate that. So Supercell is one of the top mobile games companies in the world. We're based here in Helsinki, Finland. And so it's a little dark at this time of night. We have some of the top mobile games in the world, brands you may have heard of like Clash of Clans, Brawl Stars, Clash Royale. And we have, over 100 million people play our games regularly.
Amazing. Thank you. Jason, if you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi everyone. Very excited to be here. I work for Sekisui House, which is probably hard to pronounce, but we're probably the largest home builder that you have never heard of. We own 7 U.S. new home brands, and we are the number 6 home builder in the United States. And really my role is just about really understanding consumers, what they're looking for in homes, so we can build homes that ultimately meet people's needs and help them get to a good place and live a happy life.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Patricia.
Hi, I'm Patricia Chapin-Bayley. I'm a Senior Vice President at Reid Insights. We're the full-service research arm of Rival Group, and we're an AI-forward agency heavily focused on innovation.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so everyone's been, I guess before I even get into my content, just a bit about us. So if you haven't heard of us before, we're called Rival Technologies. I've been in the online insight community and panel space for a long time. We spent a lot of time back in 2016 to 2018 reimagining quantitative research to be conversational. We have a lot of, we have a platform that's used by many of the brands you're seeing on the screen here to drive insight communities, to run agile research programs, and to do things like integrate with CRM databases to drive what we call action-triggered insights. Fortunate to be number 3 on the GRIT report this year. And not a lot of time, so I'll just continue to keep going. One thing that would be great is if you do have, which I'm guessing most people have their cell phone tethered to them. If you have your cell phone with you, go ahead and scan that QR code that's right there. It should take you to a quick, like 3 or 4 question study that actually will give us a few insights when we have our conversation just about this audience, and also give you a chance to check out what our platform looks like and check out our new UX. We've just moved all of our conversational surveys over to Liquid Glass, which is that new UX. And if you have an Apple phone, your phone has updated too. So in the purpose of time, I'm just going to continue to move forward here. So obviously, the session's all about AI. You've all been watching sessions on AI. You've been getting a lot of stats. You may have already seen these stats, but they continue to come out every day. We're seeing 20% of cyber sales were influenced by AI and AI advertising. 62% of people say that most or some of their team is using AI. We've really moved from, I think, a world where there was I guess the haves and the have-nots, the folks that were really not doing anything and the folks that were doing a lot. Now we're starting to see this groundswell happen. And then 46% of researchers says their budget for AI tools is increasing, whether that's tools that they're building themselves or whether that is tooling that they are going to be subscribing to or purchasing. So we're seeing this build. I mean, I saw a stat on LinkedIn yesterday, which started to sort of show that what's interesting is the C-suite is really taking advantage of AI, it seems like, at a very high level to really understand what's going on in the business. And that was a really interesting stat versus, a lot of other knowledge workers that are out there. And that was almost a little bit surprising to me, but at the same time, I think makes sense. So we've been running this thing called Rival Innovation Insiders, and I'm going to deliver some content from that session. Back in the summer, I found myself on LinkedIn and looking at just how noisy everyone's threads are with new prompt guides and new tools and suppliers touting this feature is the best feature ever. And it just seemed quite confusing. And I thought it would be great to have a program where we just focused on the insight space, where we were able to deliver some content and bring individuals and teams on a journey. Because my hypothesis is that if we can get individuals to embrace this idea of creativity, of play, of experimentation, you can get folks to lean in, and if you can get teams to all lean in, well, then you can really start to ladder things up. And so we've got a handful of clients that are in this program right now, and we're just actually considering launching another cohort in the next few months. So we'll just jump into some content right now, and if folks that are on the panel want to add anything, feel free. I'll definitely make sure I make some space for that. So I'm going to go through this pretty quick. Feel free to obviously reach out if you'd like some of the slides from this deck, or to have a version where I slow down, but given time. So just jumping in on large language models. So what are these things? Well, obviously they are, these are all about patterns. They are about trying to understand emergent behaviors. They are not sentient understanding right now. They are not intentional, and they definitely aren't invested in giving people the truth. And then when you double click in on that, you really get into this idea of probabilistic versus deterministic systems. And so it's crucial to have to understand that fundamental difference. Like on the left, you've got probabilistic systems. These are predictive based learning and data patterns that are trying to estimate what is the next word or the next action that you're going to have. And this is how these modern language models work. They're adaptive, they're creative, they're context aware, but their output can vary each time because they're working with probabilities, not fixed rules. And on the right, you've got deterministic systems, and these follow rule-based logic. So the same input always produces the same output. They execute predefined code and formulas with no learning or adaptation. So great for when you're trying to just automate something you want to do over and over again. They're 100% predictable and controlled, which is exactly what you want for certain kinds of applications and that are like, compliance related or automation related. And so, the most of the AI that we all interact with operates on the probabilistic side, which is why, it can fuel creative and conversations, but you also have to be very careful because you can be led down a path that's not necessarily true or accurate if you're not careful. So thinking about, LLMs, obviously they're great for synthesis, to be able to, I'm sure all of us have had that challenging email you're trying to write, and you want to make sure it's landing the right way. Or maybe it's not coming off as passive aggressive or whatever it might be. And these tools are great for that. They're great for creative and to be able to actually now help interface with other tools. Some of you may have played around with Claude's new co-work functionality. Really amazing what they've got on deck. And now obviously we're going to talk a bit about AI slop in a few minutes, but this idea of garbage in, garbage out, you got to worry about bias inheritance And I'm going to get into context window limits in just a minute. So context window limits are interesting, and when we teach about AI, one of the first things we talk about is this, and it's everyone has that experience of you're having this great conversation, and all of a sudden the AI just starts getting really dumb, and it's like, well, what happened? We were having a really great conversation, and all of a sudden AI just got really stupid, and it's just that every single session you have has a certain amount of tokens that are associated with that context window, and you run out of context when you start to run out of tokens. And the way to think about it is that one token usually is about 0.75, about 75% of a word. I've got some stats here I pulled just recently that, I think Claude is around 200,000 tokens. It's about 150,000 words or 500 pages that would sit in one session. GPT Turbo is 128,000 tokens. And so they all have very different windows, but I think understanding that's important, and then making sure that you can summarize and compress information as you go. So if this thing does get dumb, you do have a packet you can move over and start again. Chunking long inputs into digestible pieces instead of dumping everything at once. And then just, being strategic with your prompting. So being aware that up front, you have this benefit of a lot of context, and then sometimes towards the end where maybe you're trying to really get to something very important and everything starts to fall apart, you want to make sure that you can restart that session with the memory that's from the previous session. So making sure you start to get summaries going on. Sometimes I'll do that if I'm in a conversation after 5 or 6 minutes. I'll make sure there is a tight summary that's there that I can go back to if I need to start again. Then moving into ROI, when we at our Innovation Insiders program, we talk a lot about that measuring ROI upfront is important. And you look at a lot of stats that talk about AI flatlining, and I think a lot of people have run towards this shiny, cool technology without really thinking about what their outcomes are. What are they trying to drive? And so making sure that you upfront, before you start going on these journeys, that you start to really have that pre-mortem, have that ROI conversation up front. And again, in our session, we started talking about this idea of a maturity or value ladder framework. And, this isn't necessarily linear, but I think these are easy ways to understand this, that there's a lot of micro wins you can get out there, a lot of nice little quick things that save you a lot of time, whether it's research you're doing, whether it's, writing, internal memos or executive summaries. There's a lot of micro wins out there. You can move from that up to, speed and efficiency. From there, moving up to quality and productivity. I think level 4, this idea of insight interoperability, this is an obvious thing that we're going to start to see, which is the enterprise you work at is going to want to access all the data they possibly can, including insights, including custom research projects or trackers or anything you're doing. And so I think you're going to see some teams really embrace this and show up. So when the enterprise comes looking for that data, they're ready to go, or they're even, ahead of folks. And some are going to be very much behind. And then, getting all the way to this enterprise intelligence layer where we can start to use AI to really drive massive foundational shifts. So that's one view, and I think an important thing to consider when you're thinking about getting started and some of the milestones you want to get to. Getting to ROI, also you really want to start with jobs to be done and thinking about what are all the things that you are doing right now. What are the ones where you're looking for a 10x or a 5x or a 50x around output, efficiency, cost. And so, some examples in our world of insights, whether it's design and setup of research or data processing or analysis, or maybe it's reporting and delivery, maybe it's internal comms. And I think about stakeholder engagement as also a really interesting area. So definitely mapping jobs to be done is a great place to start, even if you feel like whether you're a novice or you're a pro on the AI scale. And the ROI metrics that we talk a lot about are our time savings, our cost savings, and then our quality. And so the first two are the ones that I think are the low-hanging fruit to drive towards. The quality one is also very important. And I think what's interesting is, AI can play a big role in quality lift and in depth. You just have to be very intentional about the kinds of tools you use and the kinds of outcomes you're trying to drive. We do have an ROI calculator, and we have a couple of spreadsheet templates that help with jobs to be done. So if you scan that QR code, you will be able to get you access to those artifacts if that's of interest. Okay, I've just got kind of one more, and then we're going to jump into the conversation. And this is all about structured knowledge. So if you want to, if you're using a conversational AI platform like ChatGPT or Quirk or Claude or one of the ones out there, Notebook LLM, you're best off to have a folder that has a whole bunch of default artifacts you want to be able to use over and over again. And that could be things like, for me, I've got a folder. My folder has it has a bunch of our brand guidelines, proposal templates in it. It has boilerplates on the company. It has bios on key executives. It has a whole bunch of different things that I can pull in when I'm trying to do work and be able to have them just easily to be accessible. And so by doing that, you really do save a lot of time. And I think one of the things that we do have to be careful about are things like hallucination and being able to have this be as context aware as possible. And so definitely thinking about, some people call this world building, but knowledge bases and having this structured knowledge is what we call it. Okay, I know I'm running a little behind, so I want to just continue to move here. So this is just more on structured knowledge around thinking about your inputs and being clear. And so here you can see we've got questionnaire examples, we've got best practices, we've got writing tips, we've got survey examples, we've got some content on different methodologies that we subscribe to. So that will be slightly different for each individual. And the very last one, AI slop. This is my favorite thing, which is, the worst is when someone, and we've all probably fell victim to this, and hopefully you haven't done this yourself, which is when you use AI maybe to create a presentation or to get an opinion on something or create an essay, and then you just go ahead and send that. You haven't even read it. We had a scenario where someone sent out a presentation and we did not know that individual had not even read the presentation. All of a sudden people start doing research, investing hours in responding, and later on find out, well, that individual actually didn't read that presentation. They just had AI build it and send it. And so you want to be careful about that. You don't want to be a copy and paste machine. And what I always say to everyone is just make sure, use AI all you want, just make sure that every single word that is coming out of your inbox or your text or your Slack, you can own as authentically being your words. Very important. AI slop really can, I think, ruin trust and credibility very quickly. And that's something that's very important. Okay, I'm moving forward here to get into Q&A. I don't know if any of the panelists have any comments, agreements, disagreements with what I just presented. I'll give you a second. And if not, then I will just jump right into getting into our roundtable discussion.
I just wanted to call out surrounding AI slop. It's not always laziness that leads to AI slop. Oftentimes, it's the very real human condition of, imposter syndrome, right? This amazing technology that, can sound very convincing and can write in a way that's very eloquent, but sometimes it's total nonsense. So just really having the confidence to interrogate AI and to really question what it is producing and not just sort of get drawn in by sort of the shiny polish of what it produces. Yeah.
Well said. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go into a couple of themes. The first one is about shifts, adoption, ROI. And I'm going to start with you, Jason. So the question is, when we met yesterday to prep for this panel, Jason, you mentioned that insights jobs are changing because of AI. Can you talk a bit more about that and what has shifted for you and your team in the last year or so?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I say the number one skill set of an insight professional is their ability to think. And, you know, really that's our value proposition. It's what's between our two ears. And I think so much of research prior to AI was a lot of it was mundane and very linear. You come up with a study, you think about the questions, you field it, you analyze it, you report it. And AI's taken some of that mundane away and, you know, made that time quicker, faster. And I think what it's enabled us to do is use that thinking time more effectively to be more creative. And I think two examples that how my role is changing, instead of just thinking about like a questionnaire or a specific way to ask questions in a survey or a focus group or something qualitatively, is I'll use AI to say, help me think about 10 different ways that I might be able to ask that question. So it enables me to kind of think broader. And then when it comes to delivering insights, you know, before it was like, oh, I just got to deliver a single report. And now it's, well, my CMO likes more prose. My head of sales likes very factual information. So it's enabled me to think about how do I package my insights and my deliverables to who the stakeholder is and their persona, and deliver multiple packages, which helps us have more influence and impact. So it's really shifted like our ability to think, but think in ways that we've never done before. And I really appreciate the power of AI kind of taking off some of the lift of the mundane and allowing us to use our skill, which is think, but think in a more expansive way than we have before.
That's great. I was going to ask you if the follow-up question I was going to ask you is about stakeholder engagement, and you already answered it, right? Which is great to hear that you're able to have that much more, it's almost targeting and personalization for your stakeholders versus, you know, the 70-page slide deck that, you know, there's some slides hidden in there for each of those individuals, but you got to work through all that content. Being able to deliver the right content to the right people is definitely important. So, okay, let's move into the second question. This one's for you, Trish, and then we'll try and see if we have time to get the others to chime in. So, a lot of ways to integrate AI into our work these days. What's the greatest thing that AI has enabled for you so far, Trish, or Patricia? Sorry.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and say that this one is two-pronged for me. So first, really in how it's revolutionized our workflows. So to Jason's point, really freeing up our researchers to do what they do best, so that they're not spending lots of time on sort of repetitive, low judgment, cognitive sort of tasks, and they're more focused on, you know, the things that matter and that deliver more value to our clients. So less about, you know, deliverable creation or packaging, and more about the thinking that, you know, that goes in their recommendations. The second piece of this for me is certainly around pressure testing innovation ideas. I've long been a bit of a disruptor, a bit of a challenger of conventional wisdom. And so for me, it's really helpful to have a thought partner when I'm trying to think of something, you know, a way that something can be optimized, or a way that we could approach a challenge in a new way. AI serves that as that kind of sort of litmus test. It can show me my blind spots. It can help with iteration. So I think that that's been a huge game changer.
That's great. Adam, do you want to add in on this one? I've got the next question is for you also, but anything you want to chime in on when you think about the greatest thing that AI has enabled for you, if there's one thing?
Yeah, I want to expand on Trisha's point about blind spots. I mean, for me, the brilliant thing about AI that really changed my life is that, you know, the sum total of my experiences is like 0.000001% of the world's experiences. And I'm stealing that from Morgan Housel's excellent book, like The Psychology of Money. And so when you have to think about like, what do I know? Like, my view of the world is very limited, but AI has seen all of the internet and all of Common Crawl, right? So it has a huge wealth of experiences. And so if I can prompt it in the right way, I can get things that are entirely, in statistics we call it orthogonal, but like the opposite of what I would normally think or experience. And so then I really get a very diverse set of perspectives. In fact, I was having lunch with a CDO from a company over here in Finland today, and she actually said that she herself has a group of AIs that she would then converse with to get different perspectives before she goes into critical conversations. And so even expanding on my thoughts of like getting a different perspective, she actually consults with a whole group of different ones with different, basis points, which is really cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, with time, we're going to move on. And Adam, this next question is for you. So most research teams are investing more in AI tools in 2026. What are 2 things that you're focused on this year to evolve how you use AI when you start to think about tooling?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are, we've had a lot of pilots in the last couple of years and a lot of like testing how AI can be used. And I think a lot of the narrative I've seen this year is around how do we derive real value from AI? And I think, trying to narrow it down to a couple different ways that we're thinking about using AI in the data space, right? Which, data and research are very complementary and oftentimes intersect, is AI BI is definitely one thing that we're really focused on in the data space. The amount of time we spend as data analysts or market researchers or in all of our related functions writing reports or like combing through data to find those insights is a huge part of our workflow. And while we don't want to replace that entirely, there are ways to speed it up. And AI BI is definitely becoming a very promising technology. There's a number of great startups like Hex. There's Databricks is investing it very heavily. There's a few others that are all really focused in this space. And I think hopefully by the end of this year, we'll see a few key leaders emerge and technologies that really allow us to dive deep into our data and allow us to extract those key insights. And then the other one, for the second one, is really about workflow optimization. We have a lot of point solutions right now, things that do like one task in one place. And we have these workflow tools like N8N and things like that allow you to connect multiple tools together and then start to have entire workflows be optimized instead of single tasks. And I think that will really unlock a huge change in how we do things with AI.
Well said. Well said. Jason, I'll give you a minute if you want to add anything in on your side.
Yeah, I think it's super easy, as you said, Andrew, to go on LinkedIn and get overwhelmed with everything AI. And really what we decided to focus on this year is we're going to have 3 buckets. We're going to do one bucket is let's try some things that are super low cost, super easy entry, and maybe we try 2 to 3 new things just to try it. We're going to have some investment in 2 to 3 tools where we're going to just start to use it, play around with it, pilot it. And we decided on 2 AI tools that are going to be enterprise. And we're going to really work on integrating those, putting them into our entire organization and really fully committing and investing. So I think it's easy to keep following whatever the latest and greatest is, but we've decided let's play a little bit, let's try some, and then let's integrate 2 important platforms and see if we can make it work for us as a way for us to make sure that we're not just following the next object in the next post that comes on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's tricky balance, right? It's like, you can get shiny object syndrome where there's so many cool new things coming out. We often have this conversation with my colleagues, which is like, if another innovation never happened and for some reason we capped out, we couldn't do anything else, we still would have decades to learn what to do with the technology we have at our disposal. So good on you for saying, you want to keep being curious, but you got to take some of these things and say, okay, let's actually adopt this at a large scale and start to drive these huge opportunities to transform your business. So that's great. All right, moving along. This one's for you, Patricia. So AI is reshaping today's behaviors from how people discover products and how they plan vacations. What impact are you seeing on the buyer journey and decision making when you put on your consumer research hat? And how can brands stay ahead of these shifts?
Yeah, it's a really really important question, because I think everyone's very much sold in on and sort of very focused on the efficiency of AI and the tools and and how they can streamline our workflows. I think not enough attention has been paid to how this is actually upending consumer decision making. And so what we're seeing is we're needing to optimize our research to account for a consumer journey that is no longer linear or even cyclical. It's more conversational in nature. So really trying to to understand how that's evolving and how adoption and trust across categories evolves. For brands and certainly our clients. this is a very challenging time. It's a real inflection point. It's kind of like when social media emerged on the scene. You no longer had, the primary control over how your brand was being spoken about in the wild, right? And now we're seeing that with AI. You have this very influential, tool or, chatbot that people are engaging with across their personal AI. And you don't know at what rate it's recommending your brands, what it's actually saying about your brands or products, and to who. So we're kind of operating in this black box scenario where we're working very hard to build intelligence tools around how our clients can learn more about this and really understand how it works and how to address it.
Yeah, it's like we're moving into this phase that's, post-industrial revolution around mass marketing. At the same time, I don't know if you're necessarily going to abandon it the same way how, people are still going to want to go to stores, have experiences, do things where there's an opportunity to message those folks. At the same time, having the Patricia bot that knows all of your preferences, and for probably, maybe 30% of your household purchases, if not way more, it's now going to interface with brands and it's going to make decisions on what to do. And you can take out of the loop. I don't need to make decisions on the kind of, paper towels I have on my, kitchen counter and a bunch of other ones around, what's in the door of my fridge. I'm more than happy to have technology play that role. And that's a new challenge, I think, for brands, which is exciting.
It certainly is. It's the ultimate influencer. And honestly, that kind of allure of hyper personalization is really playing out well with consumers. So brands just really need to understand how to harness that.
That's great. So I often talk about the fact that market researchers are like, it's all about the truth serum. I always talk about it's like you're giving, their job in the brand is to really dole out those spoonfuls of real truth serum to marketers and folks that are making decisions and be on those teams. And so I think you have to be extra vigilant to make sure that that there isn't hallucination, that you feel really confident in what you're getting. And so I'll start with you, Adam, and move to you, Jason. It's like, what's been the most helpful to try and reduce or catch hallucination when you think about leveraging AI, especially for some of those more, mission critical business situations or decisions you're helping with?
Yeah, well, there's of course no better thing than actually reading all the output, as you mentioned earlier. So I would say that's the number one tip to catching a hallucination is read the output. If you want to move beyond that, definitely there's a few prompting tricks. For example, and I would recommend that Claude has an excellent guide which cites some of the things, but there's some great papers on things like, for example, asking AI to cite its sources when it references specific things, asking it to use direct quotes. And, so if you're giving it like, let's say a few research reports you want to summarize, don't just say, hey, summarize these for me. Say, hey, please cite which ones you're using and please use direct quotes from it. And then the last tip that I'll leave the audience with is really about giving AI permission to say it doesn't know when it doesn't know something. So in your prompting, you can say something like, if you don't have the information, please say, I don't have enough information, or please say, I don't know. And then that actually reduces the amount of hallucinations as well.
Yeah, well said. I mean, there's so many different interesting prompts I've seen out there to help reduce hallucinations and to make sure you get more radical like truth from the AI. Jason, you want to add anything on this topic?
Yeah, I'm just going to reinforce know your data, read your data. I mean, AI isn't just, give it off and let it do its thing. I mean, I read the open ends, I look through the data, I comb through it, I know the percentages, and there's so much power in that. And I think sometimes it's easy just to forget that, a big part of our job is rolling up our sleeves. And you still need to get in there. And I think when you read the open ends, when you still go back to some of those simple things like crosstabs, that's oftentimes where you have some of your greatest epiphanies as a researcher as well. And I always say it's almost like it's better to start with your own outline first, and then use AI to more support and build. But I think oftentimes people start with AI first. And then you don't necessarily know. So I think it's a nice more to like as a gut check in the Q&A, but that piece of knowing and owning your data, because that is our role. And that really helps you know if something's coming back, you're like, that just doesn't seem right, because you know your data inside and out to begin with.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I mean, as an executive, I find myself when I've got teams presenting to me, sometimes I'll really jump in and ask very specific questions to make sure they understand the domain and what they're talking about. Because you can get a bit carried away sometimes and have a very beautiful presentation with a whole bunch of charts and graphs, and it's like, what do you really understand what's happening with this data? Are you really aware? And you know that I think you definitely want people to own all those points. Okay, Jason, moving on to another question for you. So yesterday when we were preparing for the panel, we were talking about AI maturity. And I think when I was talking about it, you had a great kind of challenge, which is you said that's like, maybe that's not the right word when we're thinking about how teams and where they're at with AI adoption. And, I think when we had that, I said, that's great. Let's talk about that in the session because we don't have to agree on everything. So I had a maturity ladder. What's your take on when you think about adoption and, points in time?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think part of it is just, I think I referenced tidal wave. I think it's like almost every 3 months we're getting a tidal wave of just new solutions and new ways to think about AI. And I think in some cases, by calling AI this sort of broad, thing of solutions and software and things that you can implement, it's not that. It starts to become so individualized because I think, a couple of years ago, AI was more of like a open AI, ChatGPT. And as Trish just said, now it's like personalized agents working for you. So I think what's happening, it's more that it's very matrix and it's almost this amoeba. So it's even if you call it maturity, the second that you get to some level, you're starting over 3 months later. And so I don't know that it's a maturity ladder per se, versus I think it's deciding like where to invest, what to invest in, how to invest in it, and how to bring it into your organization. And when I say it's almost like a specific solution within. I think it's what's happening is we're thinking about AI in the gestalt. And I think at some point we probably need to start categorizing it into different elements and facets, given the speed in which different pieces of it are evolving and moving.
Well said. You talking about picking a couple of specific tools, technologies, platforms, and then saying, let's go with these. I mean, I'd argue that might be maturity, but it's also just you're at the agent stage where if those you're saying, okay, we now need to, because you do need to continue to experiment, but you have to move to implementation. And, the more that you start to realize those real big wins, then I think you get people that much more on board with saying, okay, let's continue to lean in on this. The stat, I'm sure you folks have seen the same one. I don't know if it was from Elon or if it was from Anthropic, but it was that, the forecast is in the next 24 months, we're going to be at a point where, individual will have probably up to 90 agents you're going to be directing between your personal life and your professional life. And that world is coming to us. Maybe if it's not if it's 9, not 90, that's still a lot more than what people have right now.
Yeah, it's almost like we're all managers now, right? Like everyone has to manage their AIs and their agents. And we're shifting a little bit from us having to do the things to now we all have to evaluate everything instead and be evaluation machines. We
are. And you have to start to be, and then be really critical about the things that matter and versus the things that are slick and new and that get you pretty excited. So we have a few questions, but and I have a couple more questions. So I'm going to plow through those and then we'll start getting to the other questions. This is great. There's so much to talk about. We could just land on one of these and continue in the chat. And I will say for the group, we on purpose decided to have a conversation that's a bit more just about AI with some folks that are well-versed versus spend a bunch of time talking about AI in our technology. We have tons of AI in our technology. We have agents and features, but and happy to, at a different stage, talk about that. We felt like there'd be great value in just more talking broadly and trying to deliver some take-home value here. So hopefully that's happening. Okay, Adam, this one's for you, and then I got one more for you, Trish. So there's been a lot of discussion in our industry about synthetic respondents. Curious about your interest in this. Is this something that you've already tested, explored, or interested in?
Yeah, for sure. I think, the interesting thing about research that we always have to deal with in industries like movies or in games is that there's sometimes confidential things that we can't put out there publicly for fear of it leaking, no matter, how much we watermark, how much we, like put all the protections in place. Internal stakeholders sometimes just aren't comfortable putting some things out there. And this is where the value of synthetic respondents really comes in for us, is really then we can start to think about, can we get an early read on something before we make it public on sensitive materials? And so we've done some experiments for sure. I know there's some companies doing some interesting work. I know Taluna presented on their work on this earlier today. So I think it's an exciting space and something that's going to grow and evolve over the next year or two.
That's great. Thank you very much. And then Trish, and there's limits to talk about that. So maybe once we do this last question, we can try and loop back on it. But looking ahead to 2026, what are the types of AI capabilities that you're most excited about? And which ones do you think are slightly more hype than reality?
So I think doom and gloom replacement technologies are a little bit hyped, and I'm glad to say that. I think that the technologies I'm most excited about are the ones that really respect the human in the loop model and the power of human decision making. So for me, when I think about this, I think about looking at the technology itself and how it's advancing and evolving. For example, right now, we're reimagining visual semiotics in a market research context using a human semiotician in the loop and leveraging AI to scale a new approach. So I think that excites me the most. The way that AI vision has really advanced and allowed for this is incredible. So I'm curious to see what's around the corner. Personally, I'm very excited to plug in my digital twin, my own personal digital twin, and to see how that can make my life easier in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's going to be this next frontier that's really going to be interesting. I think some folks are going to get really good at some of this stuff. Comes down to how do you package and how do you present to different kinds of consumers and how do you give them an experience that's going to feel natural for them. And that's, I think, what will be interesting is the different creative approaches that we see there. So we did have up front, when I did ask that question and have people scan that QR code, we did have some interesting, we had 41 people start this chat. So I appreciate you doing that. It's interesting to see some of the responses that we got around. We've got, a lot of folks that are in the very proficient category. And then it seems like a good amount that are in that, like we said, that they're doing some workflows. This is being actually implemented. We've moved from, experimentation to actually implementing. And then I'll just do this last one, which is, different, looking at these different use cases. So speed, reports, idea generation, really making top box here. So thank you all for the sharing that you did do. We do have a couple questions. So one question was, I've seen some recommendation of using long prompts, multiple pages of text to give AI a set of ground rules. Do you feel like that is inadvisable based on token memory? So, and I've also heard about people, like if you want to use the API side of these technologies, you can easily script these things to say, when you start running out of tokens, I want you to actually I want you to compress this whole conversation and copy it into a new one. So there's a lot of things you can do if you want to get more creative. I think that I haven't seen any prompts that help with the context window. And I don't know if Adam or Jason, you have on your side. It's definitely something that is like, you got to really be aware of. It's like watching the speed limit when you get in the car and worrying about, getting in an accident or the police.
Yeah, I mean, on the API side of things, the context windows tend to be quite long now. Like you can get 1 million plus tokens on some of these. Like Gemini 3.1 Ultra, I think is 2 million tokens. 5.2, I think is 1 million. For the tools that we tend to use as end consumers, there are bigger limits because each time a token gets processed, there's a cost with that, right? So they tend to put bigger limits on the tools that we use than the APIs. I think one thing is if you have something really long to put in, you may want to use the API, and there are front ends to do that just as an end user. Like if you want to plug in a bunch of books or something, or a lot of research reports. The other thing is, you can ask it to summarize as you go and just keep that summary, in there, and then that will keep it longer too.
That's great. I know we're totally out of time. We've got, I think, literally 20 seconds left until we're going to get cut off here. So I'll let the I'll let the folks at Quirks back in. Thank you all for the time. We covered tons of ground here. Really great conversation. Would love to. I think we could have a 3-hour version of this and still have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, totally. Andrew, thanks so much for the moderating, and thanks so much, panelists, for being there. Great interaction, really good material for everybody. So thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.